The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Ambassador Laura Bennett stood near the massive window, watching the last human transport ship grow smaller and smaller until it vanished into the darkness of space. Behind her, more than 300 alien delegates sat in their seats, none of them speaking. The silence felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on everyone in the room. High Counselor Vexeron of the Thylorian Dominion was the first to speak. He was a tall creature, with 4 eyes that blinked one after another, and his voice carried the confidence of someone who had ruled for centuries. The humans are dramatic, nothing more. They will return when they realize they have nowhere else to go. I am not so certain, said Counselor Drymuth. She was an insectoid being with sharp mandibles that clicked when she was nervous, and they were clicking now. I reviewed the final transmission from Ambassador Samuel Grant. He said humanity considers these negotiations finished, permanently. The murmurs started then, spreading through the hall like ripples in water. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had controlled the affairs of known space. They decided who could trade with whom. They decided which species could settle which planets. They decided the laws that everyone had to follow. And in all that time, no species had ever walked away from their table. The idea was unthinkable. Where would they go? What would they do without the Council's protection and resources? Laura turned from the window and faced the assembly. She was the last human on the station, cultural liaison who had stayed behind to handle paperwork and close the human embassy. Now she found herself alone in a room full of aliens who were looking at her like she held answers she did not have. Perhaps we were too demanding, said Counselor Yemtel of the Aruni Collective. His species were merchants by nature, and he understood the value of keeping trading partners happy. The humans only wanted mining rights in the Kepler expanse. 12 systems, all of them empty. No one was using them. Ah! They were offered 3 systems, Vexeron replied sharply. 3 systems is more than generous for a species so young. They have been traveling among the stars for only 200 years. We have been here for 10,000. They should be grateful we offered them anything at all. Laura listened without expression, but inside she felt a familiar frustration. She had tried so many times to explain how humans approach negotiations. In human culture, the first offer was never the final offer. You started high, the other side started low, and then you worked toward the middle. It was how business had been done on Earth for thousands of years. But the Council did not see it that way. To them, an offer from the Council was a gift from those above to those below. To counter that offer was to insult them. There was also the matter of the Security Committee, Drymuth added. The humans requested observer status. They wanted to sit in on meetings about galactic defense. It's absurd, said another counselor, a massive creature covered in thick scales. Junior species do not attend Security Committee meetings. They are not mature enough to understand the complexities of galactic politics. Laura almost laughed at that. Humans had been dealing with complex politics since before they discovered fire. The history of Earth was filled with wars, alliances, betrayals, and peace treaties. Humans understood politics very well. What they did not understand was being treated like children. The humans will come back, Vexeron said again, as if repeating it would make it true. They need us. They need our trade networks, our technology, our protection from the dangers of deep space. Without the Council, they are alone. Laura excused herself from the hall and walked back to the human embassy. It was empty now, the desks cleared, the computers shut down, the flags taken off the walls. Only her personal belongings remained. Packed in a single bag near the door, she sat down at her desk and opened her personal communicator. A message was waiting from her brother, Commander Daniel Hayes, back on Earth. How did they take it? He asked in the recording. Laura typed her response. They think we are bluffing. They think we will come crawling back. Reply came quickly. Good. Let them think that. Laura smiled, but it was not a happy smile. She knew what her brother and the rest of the United Human Coalition were planning. She had seen the reports, the closed-door meetings, the quiet movement of ships and supplies across human space. The Council thought humans were retreating into isolation. They were wrong. Humans were preparing. For what exactly? Laura was not entirely sure. But she knew one thing about her species. When humans were pushed into a corner, they did not give up. They pushed back. She finished packing and took one last look around the empty embassy. The walls were bare now, but she remembered how they had looked when the negotiations first started. There had been such hope then. Humans had been excited to join the galactic community, to learn from older civilizations, to share what they had to offer. They had approached the council with open hands and open hearts, and the council had slapped those hands away. Laura picked up her bag and walked to the docking bay where a small shuttle was, waiting to take her to the human transport ship. As she walked through the corridors of the station, she passed aliens of dozens of species. Some of them looked at her with curiosity, some with pity, a few with something that might have been sympathy. Near the docking bay, she ran into Drymouth. The insectoid counselor was standing alone, her forearms folded across her chest. "You are leaving," Drymouth said. It was not a question. "There is nothing left for me here," Laura replied. Drymouth was quiet for a moment. Her mandibles clicked softly, a sign of thought among her people. "I have studied your species," she said finally. "Your history, your culture, your wars. You are a strange people. You fight among yourselves constantly, yet you also come together in ways I do not understand. You destroy, but you also build." Laura nodded. "That is a fair description. Council does not understand you," Drymouth continued. "They see a young species, weak and alone. They think you will break under pressure." She paused. "I am not so sure." "What do you think will happen?" Laura asked. Drymouth's eyes, large and multifaceted like a fly's, seemed to look through Laura rather than at her. "I think the council has made an error. What kind of error? I do not yet know. But I feel it in my thorax, as my people say. Something is coming." Laura did not disagree. She shook hands with Drymouth, a human gesture that the alien had learned to accept, and then boarded her shuttle. As the small ship pulled away from the station, she looked back at the massive structure one last time. The Galactic Council thought they had one. They thought the humans would come back, begging for scraps from the table of the powerful. They had no idea what they had started. Laura settled into her seat and closed her eyes. The journey home would take 3 days. She planned to use that time to rest. She had a feeling she would need her strength for what was coming. 6 months passed after the humans walked away from the negotiating table. Life on Concordia Prime continued, as it always had. The council held their meetings, passed their laws, and collected their tributes from member species. High Counselor Vexeron spoke often about the foolish humans who would soon realize their mistake. Everyone agreed with him, because everyone always agreed with the High Counselor. Then the first reports came in from the UHL. A Thylorian survey ship had traveled to the disputed systems to begin preliminary mining operations. What they found shocked them. 3 of the 12 systems were no longer empty. Human settlements had appeared on previously barren moons. Mining stations orbited asteroids rich in rare minerals. Cargo ships moved between the installations, carrying or to processing facilities that had not existed 6 months ago. The survey captain sent an immediate message to the council. Within hours, an emergency session was called. "This is an act of war," Vexeron declared, his 4 eyes blazing with anger. "The humans have invaded council territory. They must be punished." "With respect, High Counselor," said a calm voice from the holographic projector in the center of the hall. "The Kepler Expanse was never council territory." The voice belonged to Admiral Kira Dawson, commander of the human vessel Resolute. Her image flickered slightly due to the vast distance between her ship and the station, but her words were clear. "You claimed those systems," Vexeron growled. "You said they belonged to the council." "We said many things," Admiral Dawson replied. "The council never established presence in the Kepler Expanse. No stations, no settlements, no patrols. Under the principles of interstellar common law, which the council itself wrote 3,000 years ago, unoccupied systems are open for settlement by any spacefaring species." "We are the council," Drymouth interjected. "We decide what the law means." "For council members," Admiral Dawson said, "humanity is not a member. You rejected our application. Therefore, we are not bound by your interpretations." She paused. "We followed your laws to the letter. We simply used them for our own benefit." The transmission ended. Vexaran stood in silence, his massive hands gripping the podium so hard that the metal began to bend. Over the following weeks, more news arrived. Human trading posts had appeared along routes that the Council had neglected for centuries. These routes were longer and more difficult than the main shipping lanes, but they connected smaller species who had been ignored by the major powers. Human merchants were offering goods at prices far below what Council traders charged. Human engineers were selling technology that Council regulations had kept artificially expensive. The Oruni Collective was the first to break. For 2,000 years, the Oruni had controlled the trade in certain rare crystals used in faster-than-light engines. The Council had given them this monopoly in exchange for their loyalty. But the humans had found alternative sources of the crystals in the Kepler expanse, and they were selling them at half the Oruni price. Guildmaster Yemtol requested a private meeting with human representatives. When word of this reached the Council, Vexaran was furious. "You cannot negotiate with them," he told Yemtal at the next assembly. "Council members do not make independent agreements with outside powers. This is the foundation of our unity." Yemtal stood his ground. The foundation of our unity was supposed to be mutual benefit. For centuries, the Oruni have paid tribute to the Thylorian Dominion in exchange for protection. But what protection do we receive? Our trade routes are dying. Our economy is collapsing. Our people are suffering. "These are temporary difficulties," Vexaran said. "Once the humans are brought to heel, everything will return to normal. And how will you bring them to heel?" Yemtol asked. "Will you send your fleet to destroy their settlements? They have done nothing illegal. Will you blockade their territory? They are self-sufficient. Will you threaten them with war?" He gestured around the hall. "Look at us, High Counselor. Look at how many species sit in this room. How many of them would fight for you against the humans? How many of them would even care?" The silence that followed was answer enough. 3 days later, Yemtel signed a bilateral trade agreement with the United Human Coalition. It was the first such agreement between a council member and an outside power in the history of the council. It would not be the last. The news spread quickly through the galaxy. Other species began to ask questions they had never dared to ask before. Why did they pay such high prices for goods that cost so little to produce? Why did they need permission from the council to settle empty planets? Why did they send their young people to fight in wars that had nothing to do with them? The humans did not conquer these species or threaten them. They simply offered them choices. And once people had choices, they began to see their situation differently. Laura Bennett, now back on Earth working for the Coalition's diplomatic corps, followed the developments with a mixture of pride and concern. Pride because humanity's strategy was working better than anyone had expected. Concern because she knew the Council would not accept defeat quietly. Her old friend Drymouth contacted her through a private channel. "You planned this," Drymouth said. Her mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of strong emotion. "From the beginning, you planned to walk away and build your own network." "Not from the beginning," Laura admitted. "We genuinely wanted to join the Council. We genuinely wanted to be part of the galactic community, but when you rejected us, we had to find another way. The Council will not allow this to continue." "Vexaran is already talking about military action," Laura nodded slowly. "We expected that. Expected it." Drymouth sounded alarmed. "You expected war?" "We expected the Council to try to stop us. We prepared for it." Laura leaned forward. "Drymouth, I want you to understand something. Humans do not want war. We do not want to destroy the Council or replace it with something else. We just want to be treated fairly. We want a voice in decisions that affect our future. That is all we have ever wanted. Then why all this?" Drymouth gestured vaguely, indicating the chaos spreading through Council space. "Why destabilize everything?" "Because you would not listen any other way," Laura said simply. "We tried talking. We tried being polite. We tried following your rules. None of it worked. So we found another approach. Drymouth was quiet for a long time. Finally, she asked, "What happens now?" "That depends on the Council," Laura replied. "They can accept that the galaxy is changing and change with it. Or they can fight against the change and lose everything." She paused. "I know which option I would choose. But I am not the one making decisions on Concordia Prime." After the call ended, Laura sat alone in her office for a long time. Through her window, she could see the lights of the city stretching toward the horizon. Earth had come so far in 200 years, from a single planet to 40 systems, from primitive rockets to ships that crossed the galaxy in weeks, but the greatest journey, she thought, was still ahead. The journey from outsiders to equals. From rejected applicants to respected partners, it would not be easy. It might not even be possible. But humans had never let impossible odds stop them before. They certainly were not going to start. Now, 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the Council's table. In that time, everything had changed, and yet the Council pretended nothing had changed at all. High Counselor Vexeron still gave speeches about human foolishness. The Thalorian fleet still patrolled the major shipping lanes. The ancient rituals of galactic governance continued as they had for thousands of years. But beneath the surface, cracks were spreading. Commander Daniel Hayes sat in his office on Titan Station. Reviewing the latest intelligence reports, 17 species had now signed agreements with the United Human Coalition. Some were trade deals. Some were mutual defense pacts. Some were simple promises of friendship and cooperation. None of them had required threats or force. All of them had been freely chosen. His sister Laura entered the office and sat down across from him. She looked tired but satisfied. She had just returned from a diplomatic mission to the Ven homeworld, a planet that had been strip-mined by Thalorian corporations and left to struggle with the environmental damage. "How did it go?" Daniel asked. "Better than expected," Laura replied. "The Ven are angry. They have been angry for centuries, but they never had anywhere to direct that anger. The Council was too powerful, too distant, too untouchable. Now they see another option. Did they sign? They signed." Laura allowed herself a small smile. "They also gave us something else. Information. Details about Council military deployments, supply routes, communication frequencies. Things that could be very useful if hostilities break out." Daniel nodded slowly. This was the pattern they had seen again and again. Species that had been loyal to the Council for millennia were suddenly willing to share secrets. Not because humans had bribed them or threatened them, but because humans had shown them respect, had listened to their grievances, had treated them as partners rather than subjects. "I had another call from Drymouth," Laura said. "She is worried. The Council is preparing for something big. Vexeran has been meeting privately with the military commanders." "We expected that," Daniel said. "She thinks it might be soon. Within months, maybe weeks." Daniel turned to look out the window. Titan Station orbited Saturn, far from Earth but still within the heart of human space. From here he could see dozens of ships coming and going, carrying goods and passengers across the growing human network. "Then we need to be ready," he said. The preparations had actually begun long before the negotiations failed. Human strategists had studied the Council's history carefully. They had learned how the Thalorian Dominion rose to power by offering protection to weaker species, then slowly tightening their grip until those species could not survive without them. They had learned how the Council maintained control through economic dependency, making sure that no member could feed itself, defend itself, or trade without Council approval. And they had learned the Council's weakness. The entire system depended on one thing: the belief that there was no alternative. As long as species believed they needed the Council, they would accept whatever terms the Council offered. But the moment they saw another option, that belief would crumble. Humans had become that other option. "Tell me about the Solari," Daniel said, turning back to his sister. Laura pulled up a file on her tablet. "The Solari are a small species on the outer edge of Council space. Their territory borders the Dark Rift, a region filled with pirates and raiders. For 50 years, they have been begging the Council for protection. For 50 years, the Council has ignored them. And now Now they have a human patrol fleet stationed in their system. We are not charging them tribute or demanding political concessions. We are simply helping them because they asked. Do you know what the Solari ambassador said to me? He said it was the first time anyone had helped his people without asking for something in return. Daniel felt a familiar mixture of emotions. Pride in what humanity was accomplishing. Sadness at how low the bar had been set. Anger at the Council for creating a galaxy where simple kindness was so rare that people wept when they received it. The Keth are next on our list, Laura continued. Their population was devastated by a plague 20 years ago. They asked the Council for medical technology. The Council debated for 3 years, and by the time they agreed to help, half the Keth were dead. What do they need now? Medical supplies, doctors, training for their own healers. Laura set down her tablet. We can provide all of it. We have already sent a hospital ship to their homeworld. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a human cruiser was departing for the Kepler expanse, its hull gleaming in the light of distant Saturn. It was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but it represented something larger than itself. It represented hope. The Council does not understand what we are doing, Daniel said. They think this is about power, about territory, about winning and losing. They cannot imagine that we are doing this because it is right. Maybe that is why we will succeed, Laura replied. Because we are not trying to build an empire. We are trying to build something better. Message alert chimed on Daniel's console. He read it quickly, and his expression hardened. What is it? Laura asked. Intercepted communication from Concordia Prime. Vexeron has called a full council assembly. Every member species is required to attend. Required? His word. Daniel turned to face his sister. This is it. He is going to propose military action against us. Laura was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been hanging over all of them for months. Are we ready? Daniel considered the question carefully. Human forces were outnumbered 10-1 by the combined council fleets. Human territory was smaller, younger, less developed. By any objective measure, humanity could not win a direct war with the council. But wars were not won only with ships and soldiers. They were won with allies, with information, with the willingness to keep fighting when the odds seemed impossible. We are ready, Daniel said finally. And even if we are not, we have no choice. We started this. We have to see it through. Laura nodded and stood up. I will contact our friends in council space. The Aruni, the Ven, the Solari, the Keth. They need to know what is coming. Tell them the truth, Daniel said. Tell them we do not know how this will end. Tell them there may be hard times ahead. And tell them that no matter what happens, humanity will stand with them. We will not abandon our partners the way the council abandoned them. Laura left the office. Daniel remained by the window, watching the ships move through the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, most powerful civilization in the galaxy was preparing to crush humanity. They had more ships, more soldiers, more resources, more experience. They had ruled the stars since before humans discovered agriculture, but they had forgotten something important. They had forgotten that power was not just about size. It was about what you were willing to fight for, what you were willing to sacrifice for, what you believed in. The council believed in control, in hierarchy, in keeping everyone in their proper place. Humanity believed in something else, in freedom, in fairness, in the idea that every species, no matter how young or small, deserved a voice. That belief had carried humans from caves to the stars. It would carry them through whatever came next. Daniel turned away from the window and began preparing for war. The great hall of Concordia Prime had never been so full. Every seat was occupied. Every species in council space had sent representatives. Holographic projections flickered in special sections reserved for those who could not attend in person. The air hummed with the sound of translators working overtime to convert hundreds of languages into something everyone could understand. Hi, Counselor. Exaran stood at the central podium. Looking out over the assembly with his 4 eyes, he had waited a year for this moment. A year of humiliation as the humans picked apart his carefully constructed order. A year of watching species that had been loyal for millennia suddenly discovered that they had options. A year of pretending that everything was fine while his empire crumbled around him. No more pretending. Today he would act. We face an existential threat, Vexeron began, his voice echoing through the hall. The humans have undermined our authority. They have stolen our trade partners. They have violated territories that rightfully belong to the Council. They have turned our own members against us. He paused, letting his words sink in. Some of you have been seduced by their promises. Some of you have signed agreements with them, thinking you were gaining independence. You were wrong. The humans do not want partners. They want servants. They are simply better at hiding their true intentions than we are. A murmur ran through the crowd. Not everyone believed him, but many did. The Thalorian Dominion had ruled for so long that some species could not imagine the galaxy without them. I propose a unified military response, Vexeron continued. Every member species will contribute ships and soldiers to a combined fleet. We will travel to the Kepler Expanse and remove the illegal human settlements. We will blockade human space until they agree to submit to Council authority, and we will punish any species that has collaborated with them.
Oh, I see.
The hall erupted into chaos. Some delegates cheered. Others shouted objections. Several species that had signed agreements with humanity looked around nervously, wondering if they were about to become targets and what of the cost. Asked a voice that cut through the noise. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Counselor Drymuth, standing in her section with her forearms folded across her chest. She had been quiet throughout the crisis, neither supporting Vexeron nor openly opposing him. Now she walked toward the center of the hall, her chitinous armor reflecting the lights above. The humans have defensive alliances with 17 species, Drymuth said. An attack on them would be an attack on all of their partners. Are we prepared to fight a war on that many fronts? The allies are weak, Vexeron replied dismissively. The Aruni are merchants, not soldiers. The Vin are still recovering from what the mining corporations did to their world. The Solari can barely defend themselves. They are not a serious military threat. Perhaps not individually, Drymuth agreed, but together? And more importantly, what happens if other species join them? What happens if more council members decide that the humans offer a better future than we do? That will not happen, Vexeron said firmly. It is already happening. As gestured at the assembly. Look around this hall, High Counselor. How many of these species are truly loyal to you? How many of them stay only because they fear what would happen if they left? Fear is a weak foundation for power. The moment that fear fades, so does your control. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You speak as if you sympathize with the humans. I speak as someone who has studied them, Drymuth replied calmly. I have learned their history. I have learned their culture. And I have learned the most important lesson they can teach us, which is that empires fall. Drymuth turned to address the full assembly. Human history is filled with empires that thought they were eternal. The Romans, the Mongols, the British, all of them believed they would rule forever. All of them were wrong. And do you know what brought them down? Not external enemies. Not natural disasters. They fell because the people they ruled stopped believing in them. She let that sink in before continuing. The Council has ruled for 3,000 years. We have maintained order. We have prevented wars between species. We have done many good things. But we have also grown arrogant. We have forgotten that our power depends on the consent of those we govern. And when a young species came to us asking for a seat at our table, we laughed at them and sent them away. They were demanding too much, Vexeron protested. They were negotiating, Drymuth shot back. They were doing what every species does when they want something. They asked for more than they expected to get, hoping to meet in the middle. But we did not understand their customs. We took offense where none was intended. And now, we are paying the price. The hall was silent now. Everyone was listening. I am not saying the humans are perfect, Drymuth continued. I am not saying we should surrender to them. I am saying that war is not the only option. I am saying that perhaps, if we had listened to them a year ago, none of this would have happened. And I am saying that it is not too late to try a different approach. Vexeron's hands gripped the podium so hard that his claws left marks in the metal. What approach do you suggest? Talk to them. Actually talk, not lecture. Find out what they really want. Find common ground. Drymouth looked directly at the High Counselor. You are afraid that negotiating with the humans would make us look weak. I tell you that refusing to negotiate will make us look foolish. The galaxy is watching. They will remember how we handle this moment. For a long moment, no one spoke. Vexeron and Drymouth stared at each other across the hall, two visions of the future facing off. Then, Vexeron laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You have spent too much time studying humans, he said. You have begun to think like them. Weakness disguised as wisdom. Surrender disguised as compromise. He turned back to the assembly. I call for a vote. All in favor of military action against the human threat. Hands and appendages rose across the hall, but not as many as Vexeron had expected. Perhaps 60% of the assembly supported him. It was enough to pass the motion, but it was far from the unanimous support he had hoped for. The motion carries, Vexeron announced. We will begin assembling the fleet immediately. Any species that refuses to contribute will be considered in violation of their council obligations. Drymouth stood alone as the assembly began to break up. She had done what she could. She had tried to offer another path. But the council had chosen war. As she walked out of the hall, she activated a secure communication device hidden in her armor. A human face appeared on the small screen. Commander Hayes, she said quietly. It is done. They voted for war. Daniel Hayes nodded slowly. His expression was sad, but not surprised. How long do we have? Weeks, perhaps. They need time to assemble the fleet. Thank you for trying, Counselor. And thank you for warning us. Drymouth paused. What will you do now? What we always do, Daniel replied. We will fight. We will survive. And when the fighting is over, we will build something better from the wreckage. He paused. You could come with us. Your family, your supporters, we would welcome you. Drymouth considered the offer. Part of her wanted to accept. Part of her knew that her place was here, trying to limit the damage from within. Not yet, she said finally. There is still work I can do here. But thank you for the offer. Will remain open, Daniel said. Whatever happens, you will always have friends among humanity. The communication ended. Drymouth stood alone in the corridor, surrounded by the ancient architecture of the council she had served her entire life. Change was coming. Whether it would be change for the better or worse, she could not say. But it was coming, and nothing could stop it now. The council fleet was 3 days away. It's from human space when everything changed. It began with a message from the Aruni Collective. They were withdrawing from the fleet. Their ships turned around and headed home, leaving a gap in the formation that threw the entire battle plan into confusion. Then came the Solari, then the Keth, then a dozen other species, all of them members of the Human Alliance, all of them refusing to fight against their new partners. High Counselor Vexarin raged aboard his flagship, demanding explanations, issuing threats. But the threats rang hollow. How could he punish species for leaving when he needed every ship for the coming battle? How could he maintain discipline when his own fleet was falling apart? The final blow came from an unexpected source. The Merchant Guild of Aruni announced that they were cutting off supply shipments to the fleet. Without fuel, without food, without replacement parts, even the mightiest warship was just a metal box floating in space. Vexeron had two choices. He could continue to ward human space with a weakened fleet and no supply lines, facing almost certain defeat. Or he could turn back and admit that his grand plan had failed. He turned back. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The mighty Galactic Council, rulers of 2,000 systems, had been stopped without a single shot fired. Not by human weapons, but by human relationships. By the simple fact that humans had made friends where the Council had made subjects. 2 weeks later, a message arrived at Coalition headquarters on Titan Station. Commander Daniel Hayes read it with a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. The Galactic Council was requesting a meeting. Not demanding. Requesting. They want to discuss terms, his aide reported. They are offering a complete review of our original proposals. Mining rights, trade access, representation on the Security Committee. Everything we asked for a year ago. And what else? Daniel asked. He knew the council well enough to know they would not stop there. The aide hesitated. They are offering full membership. Immediate, not provisional. With all the rights and privileges that come with it, Daniel leaned back in his chair. A year ago, this offer would have seemed like a dream come true. Humanity welcomed into the galactic community as equals. A seat at the table they had been denied for so long. But things had changed. Humanity had changed. Tell them we are willing to talk, Daniel said finally. But not on Concordia Prime. If they want to negotiate with us, they can come here. To Titan's station. The aide's eyes widened. Sir, no species has ever made the council travel to them for negotiations. Then we will be the first. Daniel smiled slightly. And tell them to bring an open mind. Because we are not going to negotiate just for ourselves. 3 weeks later, the impossible happened. High Counselor Vexaran of the Thylorian Dominion walked through the corridors of a human space station. Surrounded by human guards, watched by representatives of species he had dismissed as unimportant for centuries, the great ruler who had never bowed to anyone found himself, sitting across a table from Commander Daniel Hayes as an equal. The negotiations were not held in private. Laura Bennett had insisted on that. Representatives from the Aruni, the Ven, the Solari, the Keth, and a dozen other species sat along the walls, watching every word, every gesture. Every concession could have destroyed us, Vexaron said quietly, during a break in the formal discussions. He and Daniel stood by a window, looking out at the stars. You had the alliances. You had the economic leverage. You had proven that our power was an illusion. You could have torn the council apart and built your own empire on its ruins. Daniel shook his head. That was never the goal. Then what was? What did you want, if not power? We wanted what we said we wanted from the beginning. A voice, a seat at the table, the chance to be heard. Daniel turned to face the High Counselor. We did not walk away from your negotiations because we wanted to conquer you. We walked away because you would not listen. You saw us as children, as primitives, as a nuisance to be managed. We saw ourselves as equals who deserved respect. Vexaron was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Older, somehow wearier. I have ruled for 300 years, he said. In all that time, I never questioned the way things were. The strong ruled. The weak obeyed. It was the natural order of the universe. He paused. Your species has been traveling among the stars for 2 centuries. How did you learn what took us millennia to miss? We learned it the hard way, Daniel replied. Human history is full of empires that thought they could rule by force alone. They all fell eventually. The ones that lasted were the ones that earned loyalty instead of demanding it. He looked out at the stars. We are not better than you, High Counselor. We are not smarter or stronger or more virtuous. We just made different mistakes, and we learned from them. The negotiations resumed. They lasted for 3 months. They were difficult, contentious, and sometimes explosive. Old grievances surfaced. Old wounds were reopened. More than once, the talks nearly collapsed entirely, but they did not collapse. Because both sides, for the first time, truly wanted them to succeed. The final document was called the Compact of Titan. It replaced the old council charter with something new, something built on different principles. Under the old system, power had flowed from the top down. Under the new compact, every species had an equal voice, regardless of size or age or military strength. Decisions required consensus, not just majority votes. And no species could be forced to do anything against their will. It was not perfect. Nothing created by living beings ever was. There would be challenges and conflicts in the years ahead. Old habits would die hard. Some species would resist change. Some would try to exploit the new system for their own benefit, but it was a start, A foundation for something better. The signing ceremony was held in the main hall of Titan Station. Laura Bennett stood at the back of the room, watching as representative after representative added their mark to the document. Humans and Thylorians. Oruni and Ven, Solari and Keth, species that had been enemies for centuries. Standing together as partners, Drymouth found her after the ceremony was over. The insectoid counselor looked tired but happy. Her mandibles clicked in a pattern that Laura had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "You did it," Drymouth said. "You changed everything." "We all did it," Laura replied. "Humans just got the ball rolling. Everyone else did the hard work." Drymouth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Modest to the end. That is very human of you, is it? I thought stubbornness was our defining trait." "That too." Drymouth looked around the crowded hall. "I never thought I would see this day. A galaxy where species treat each other as equals, where power is shared instead of hoarded, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. It is not there yet," Laura said honestly. "We have a long way to go, but we are on the path." Drymouth turned to face her friend. "That is what matters. We are on the path," Laura nodded. Through the window behind Drymouth, she could see the stars stretching out in every direction. Each one was a sun. Each sun might have planets. Each planet might have life. The universe was vast beyond comprehension, filled with wonders they had not yet discovered and challenges they had not yet faced, but they would face them together, not as conquerors and conquered, not as rulers and ruled, as partners, as equals, as the galaxy had always been meant to be. She smiled and raised a glass. "To new beginnings," she said. Drymouth raised her own glass. "To new beginnings." Around them, the celebration continued. Beings from across the galaxy laughed and talked and made plans for the future. Somewhere in the crowd, Daniel Hayes was discussing trade routes with a Ven merchant. Admiral Kira Dawson was comparing military tactics with a Thalorian commander. Guildmaster Yemtel was explaining the finer points of crystal commerce to a group of fascinated human traders. It was messy and complicated and uncertain. There would be setbacks and failures in the days ahead, but there would also be triumphs and breakthroughs, because that was how progress worked. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, always moving, always changing, always growing. Humanity had walked away from a table that did not want them, and in doing so, they had built something better. Not just for themselves, but for everyone, it was, Laura thought, a very human way to win.